No risk it, no biscuit.
Coming from the Arizona desert, presented by SBNation.com. For Arizona Cardinals fans, by Arizona Cardinals fans, with outsider and insider's perspectives, this is Revenge of the Birds. Welcome, Arizona Cardinals fans. This is Revenge of the Birds Radio. This is your host, Jess Root. On the line with us is Seth Cox. How you doing, Seth?
Good, Jess. How are you?
Doing great, as we get to talk some Arizona Cardinals football following a boring first half, but a thrilling finish as the Arizona Cardinals beat the San Diego Chargers at home in a close one, 18-17. Not the type of game most people were expecting, but they come away from Monday Night Football, the last game on the docket, and finish off the week at 1-0. Thanks to a couple of fourth quarter touchdowns by the Arizona Cardinals. Let's kind of keep it a rundown before we start. And the show tonight. The show today, Revenge of the Birds Radio, is brought to you by Audible.com, the internet's leading audio content provider, where you can find all sorts of information in audio, whether it be podcasts, talk shows, audiobooks. And for Revenge of the Birds Radio listeners, we have a special offer for you. If you go to audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds, you can sign up for a free month of Audible and pick yourself up a free audiobook download and try out the service, check it out, and give it a shot. It's for our listeners. It's audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds, and give it a shot. Give it a try because it's a great service. On our trip a couple of weekends ago, I turned on one of the audiobooks to listen to for the family, and it was a smooth, nice, quiet ride. And my wife didn't get car sick, which she normally does. It was good times. So we get started here. The Arizona Cardinals start off 1-0. They get the 18-17 victory over the San Diego Chargers. It started out kind of a dud as it was 6-3 going into halftime, or as I heard some people calling it 15-15 after 6 quarters of the fourth preseason game. The Cardinals picked up a field goal early. The Chargers picked up a field goal later on, and then after a Gerard Powers interception, with 16 seconds left in the half and right around midfield, the Cardinals were able to do some executing, kind of the things that they drew up all the offseason, those situational football, and after a pass play at Andre Ellington, a deep throw down to Ted Ginn, they were able to bring on Chandler Catanzaro for a 44-yard field goal that ended the half to give them the 6-3 lead. Chargers, though, came out in the beginning of the second half and dominated the Cardinals as they went down and scored a touchdown. Then they took the ball away and scored another touchdown, putting them up by 11 points. However, Arizona bounced back, and behind solid defensive play overall and a couple of late drives led by Carson Palmer, one throwing a touchdown pass to John Brown, and then a touchdown pass to Stephon Taylor. And in the end, it was an 18-17 victory as the Cardinals went twice for 2 points, failing to convert on either of those attempts. And the game they got the stop on fourth down. It really was a thrilling game in the second half. So what I'd like to do, and before we get started, there was a couple of things injuries-wise as 2 Arizona Cardinals left the game. Linebacker John Abraham left the game with concussion, with a head injury. He was evaluated for concussion. He's now going through concussion protocol. We'll see what happens. Defensive end Frosty Rucker starting in the place of the injured Darnell Dockett, who was lost for the season. With the torn ACL, Frosty Rucker injured his calf and came out of the game early after just a couple of plays. We found out on Tuesday from Bruce Arians that Rucker is doubtful for the game in New York. So they're down another defensive lineman. And Andre Ellington, who I don't know if it's surprising, he surprisingly ended up playing after the report was on last Friday that his foot injury was more severe. He's going to sit out 4 to 6 weeks. It's going to miss significant time. Pre-practice Saturday was limited, and he played on Monday night. 13 carries, 53 yards, 5 catches for 27 yards, a total of 80 yards from scrimmage on 18 touches, including he broke, I was an 18-yard run, I believe, that he broke out and was very key. But he was available. He was in a walking boot on Tuesday, it was reported. And looks like it's going to be one of those things that kind of going to be touch and go most of the season until it finally heals up. I think it's more like how Rashard Mendenhall's injury was a year ago. Over the course of the year, but he was out there. Tyrann Mathieu did not play. Dave Zastudil did not punt, but was active as the holder, and the Cardinals signed Drew Butler to punt. He had some big, deep punts. They ended up in the end zone, and he was also blocked once, which led to some points by San Diego. But let's now, we got Seth on the line. We've already talked. He's going to sit in there listening to me ramble, and you guys have listened to me ramble as well. Jess Root from Revenge of the Rose Radio, and Seth Cox, who joins me every week as we review the previous game of the Arizona Cardinals. And what we're going to do tonight, before we get started, we're going to give our gut reactions. What did we see as we were watching the game? What did it feel like? And then we're going to bust into those numbers to see more or less what the reality was. And we're going to talk about things that stood out, concerns. And so let's go ahead and get started. So let's first up talk about the offense. What was your gut feeling as you watched that game on Monday night, Seth? What was your gut feeling about how the offense did?
I think it was just kind of a tale of two halves. You had...
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say you had a disappointing first half where you really saw 2013, the 2013 offense just in general. I mean, nothing really happening for the Cardinals. They were missing a lot of throws. No real push in the run game. And then in the second half, you saw, I think, what we all expected to see from this team. A little more dynamic, the ability to not just try to push the ball down the field every play. And that seemed kind of like what they were trying to do at the beginning of the game. That balanced run game, you talked about a little bit. Ellington ended up with 13 carries. I think you and I think he had 4 catches. And that's something you and I talked about. The goal isn't the 25 to 30 touches that Bruce Arians, alleged when he was talking about Ellington being the feature back in the coming season. For me, it was all about Ellington being able to get enough carries to find those 2 or 3 runs that, can make a defense stay honest. And I think we saw that. I think I going through my notes here, I think on 2 of his runs, I believe he had 25 total yards. So the other 11 runs were for 28 yards. That's kind of what we talked about. It's, he's not a guy that's going to give you, that real 5 yards per carry average. He's going to give you 2 yards, 2.5 yards, 3 yards, and then he's going to give you 15 or 20 yards. And that's what this offense needs because, that's what he does. So I think that was my gut reaction from the offense. I know a lot of people are upset with Larry Fitzgerald's usage or lack of usage. But until the all 22 is out, we really can't tell what was missed and what was just kind of assumed to be missed. So I think that was my initial gut reaction.
Well, and my gut reaction throughout the game, now a lot was made between Twitter and I'm guessing the TV broadcast. As kind of the joke in the press box was on Monday night, it was, hey, at least we don't have to listen to Chris Berman on the ESPN feed. That was a recurring theme throughout the press box. So based on what I was following on Twitter during the game, is that was brought up a lot. How Fitzgerald wasn't targeted. What my gut reaction, aside, there's a couple of gut reactions I felt. It almost felt like they were forcing it to Ellington too much throughout much of the game. That's how it felt to me as I was watching it, and then overall, it was kind of a feeling where Palmer wasn't really having that good a game. He had a couple of throws that probably should have been picked off, which felt like Carson Palmer in Carson Palmer's career, where he makes some throws that'll make you scratch your head or shout why, and he comes away from he comes out with it without any issue. He's kind of had some of that luck. I don't know what the numbers are, but I know that I think he's among the more fortunate quarterbacks in terms of throws that should be interceptions but are not, whether that's fortune, whether that's whatever that is. But offensively, it felt like, well, early there were miscommunications. It felt like, wait a minute, weren't they supposed to be taken care of? And it didn't feel like they were quite in sync. Carson Palmer wasn't having a great game. He wasn't doing game-crushing errors. The offensive line was playing well. Michael Floyd was fantastic early in the game, and then it kind of disappeared after that, as it felt like the game plan was get the ball to Ellington, get the ball to Ellington, get the ball to Ellington, and I felt almost that was, and I know why they did it, but it felt like they were trying to force it a little much. And it didn't feel like an good offensive game. So let's look at the numbers and see what it actually tells us, which is kind of interesting to see that. In the end, well, and it also felt like another thing, it felt like they weren't running the ball enough. Or they just weren't doing. But then let's look at the stats. They ran the ball 26 times. Let's take the kneel down away that Carson Palmer had at the end and his 3 scrambles. So they attempted the 22 running back carries. They had 109 yards rushing, 4.2 yards a carry. Now, a couple of those, 3 of those were Carson Palmer scrambles that went for 30 yards. One of those was 18 yards for Andre Ellington. But they ran the ball well enough. Carson Palmer, 24 of 37 for 304 yards, 2 touchdowns, a quarterback rating of over 108, and that's a great line. Michael Floyd, 5 catches for 119 yards. Andre Ellington. So overall, we feel like it just didn't feel like that offensive game went well. But then you look at the total numbers. Guess what? They put up over 400 yards of offense. On third down, they were 46%, so they were almost 50% of their third downs. Only gave up 2 sacks. I mean, that's not awesome. It's not bad considering years past. They rushed for over 100 yards. They were 75% in the red zone. If you were to look at those numbers without watching the game, if you saw those numbers come across the box score, wouldn't you think that's a pretty good game?
Yeah, and I think what happens with the Cardinals in general, and I think with us as in fans, is that we're expecting a lot from this offense. Probably too much, to be honest with you. I think we expected to see something like what Denver did a lot last year, with Manning, throwing touchdowns to 4 different guys in the game, and then Noshawn Moreno having 85, 95, 105 yards in a game. And I think that's what we expected from the Cardinals. And they put up good numbers. Like you said, 403 yards of offense on 65 plays. Only the 1 turnover, or did they have 2?
Just
there
was the second one. the Ellington the Ellington fumble that turned into a Bobby Massey fumble.
and you look at it and you say, okay, that, you know, it wasn't bad, but what it was or wasn't, I think, is it comes down to the fact that you have all those yards and he scored 18 points. And I think that's where kind of our, you know, your eye and my eye looks at, you know, we've kind of tried to train ourselves to stop looking at these bulk numbers of yards and yards per play and things like that. And we're trying to look at the more meaningful things, obviously points being one of them. You know, how many points are they scoring? You know, time of possession, things of that nature. And that's kind of where, at least for me, I think there's the disconnect of, you know, 403 yards of offense puts them, you know, obviously after one game, number 10 in the NFL. 18 points puts them at number 20 in the NFL. You know, that's a pretty big disparity when you just talk about the number of points versus the number of yards. So you look at it, and I just think, you know, we were all so excited with how well the offense was playing in the preseason, and quite frankly, how well they played between the 20s. In the game, it just seemed like it wasn't even red zone issues. It seemed like they got past the 50-yard line, and all of a sudden, they're all the warts that they had decided to show themselves through. And you know, we saw it with the Ellington fumble that became the Bobby Massey fumble. You know, we saw it with Carson Palmer missing on some throws. We saw it with bad routes. We saw it with the drop. It all of a sudden, all the bad things that we thought could happen happened, and they happened after they had already gone 40, 50 yards down the field.
And, well, yes, the what we would have liked to have seen would definitely more points. And I think part of that came, in fact, because the expectations was much more. I know it definitely was for me. It was with John Gennaro when I previewed the game with him last week. Before the game, you were expecting, and I think everyone was expecting in week one, especially with the kind of unknown quantity that the Arizona Cardinals defense was going to be, or at some level, was they're expecting a shootout. It ended up being a really close game. And it came down to the very end, and you know, if a couple of strange play calls with the first 2-point conversion to this, I don't know if I'll ever understand why they decided to do a direct snap to Jonathan Dwyer, and rather than taking the extra point on both of those times, they come up with 20 points, which looks a little bit better, 20-17. But it just ended up being, it didn't end up with they moved the ball pretty well, but you didn't see the results, which felt very, actually 2012-ish, at least the beginning of 2012, the beginning of like Kevin Cobb 2012 before he got hurt, when the Cardinals were winning and they were doing just enough offensively to go along with their defense.
Well, and you kind of look at it, it's funny that you talk about that Dwyer play. I said during the game, I'm convinced Arians just ran that play to show that the Wildcat doesn't work, because he hates that so much, and that's just him being spiteful out there. But you know, you look at the numbers, and what's the craziest thing is, as great as the Cardinals defense was, I mean, the Chargers only had 290 yards of total offense. That was the sixth lowest in week one. And they still put up 17 points. And it still was, they still had to get a defensive stand at the end of the game, you know, to win. That, I think that's where we're all like, wow, you know, we expected this high octane offense, this, you know, pedal to the metal offense, and we saw it in spurts. I think we're all expecting to see it for 4 quarters, and maybe that's just unrealistic with the team as constructed, especially, you know, with a guy like Carson Palmer at the helm, where he does have his bugaboos, and, you know, quite frankly, we talk about the offensive line only giving up 2 sacks. I mean, they were definitely better than anything we're used to seeing, but I think our standards are so low that it ends up being, we give it more credit than, kind of what they deserve.
Well taken, well taken. Offensively, if we look at the numbers overall, the Cardinals came away with 5 plays of at least 20 yards, and then another 4, so 9 total that were 15 yards or greater. They had the 63-yarder to Michael Floyd. That was a beautiful play. They had 41 yards to Michael Floyd. They had 25 yards to Ted Ginn, which was the play that set up the 44-yard field goal right at the half. There was the 22-yard play to Larry Fitzgerald in the fourth quarter, his only catch, which became a very, very important catch. They had the 20-yard play on third down to John Carlson early in the game, and after that they had Ellington's 18-yarder. You had the John Brown play to 16 yards on that comeback route. And then he had Rob Hauser for 16. That was really pretty play. And then another 16-yarder to Michael Floyd. So they got some big plays. They took shots down the field, and they weren't even in sync because they missed. They had some plays that ended up not working. But let's turn to the defensive side. Let's kind of go, what did we see? What was the gut telling us as we watched it? I'll give you my gut feelings right off the bat. The run defense, wow. They were good. And when we get to the numbers, we'll actually be able to see that was definitely the case. But we saw, it's like that run defense. Why are they running the ball? And I was thinking, why are they running the ball? Why do they keep running the ball? Because they're not having any success doing it. At the same time, the gut says, oh wow, Larry Foote, he's all over the place. At the same time, said, oh, tight end still giving some issues. I guess that's probably because it was so exposed and so talked about last year. Tight ends will make catches against defenses, and so any time a tight end catches the ball, especially on a deep play, a play that gains a lot of yards, think, oh, there's those tight ends again. Never mind, it's Antonio Gates, who's got to be a Hall of Famer. But those are the impressions you think. You see, wow, they did their job except for down right off those 2 drives, those first 2 drives in the second half. One coming out of the half right out the door of the halftime, and then after the sack fumble, after the turnover, they just couldn't do anything. But other than that, it was a case where you're like, this defense, they still have it. Did you feel the same way as you were watching? I know your Twitter reaction was Matt Shaughnessy. Wow.
Yeah, you just look at what they did defensively, and you have to be impressed with, like you said first, the run defense. And you never want to say, oh, why is a team running the ball as much as they are? But I think in this case, you do say, why is this team trying to run the ball? I mean, I understand the big touchdown run, and that was an excellent play call, and it really was. They set it up by running the ball, so obviously it worked in the end. But then they were, went back to the ground a lot, and they were having no success. They came out of the half, and my initial reaction out of the half was, wow. Mike McCoy gave them a stern talking to about the fact that the middle of the field is completely open, and it took Todd Bowles, in a quarter to figure that out and kind of get that rectified, and then we saw it, it kind of shut down everything that the Chargers were having success with. So, but yeah, the run defense it continues to be great. We talked about that before the game. I didn't really see where there would be a drop off in the run defense. I did, I still am very concerned about the fact that there's just no pass rush. King Dunlap is an okay left tackle. DJ Fluker is an excellent run blocker. He's a good pass protector, and obviously John Abraham went out of the game early, like you talked about. It's just where's the pass rush? I think that was my biggest gut reaction. Where's this team gonna get a pass rush from?
And let's look at the numbers. Let's pull up the numbers then for the defense. And the biggest thing you say, yes, they gave up the 17 points. However, let's go down to the yards. They held the Chargers 290 yards of offense total, which is significant considering that is more than 100 yards less that they averaged per game a season ago. They averaged, I think it was 393 yards and some change, so nearly 400 yards of offense on average a season ago. They allowed only 52 yards rushing, and 30 of those came on 2 plays. One was a Phillip Rivers scramble of 10 yards, and then the other was the 20-yard touchdown run by Ryan Matthews, that was a disaster. I don't know what happened. They subbed in, brought in an 8-man line. They had an 8-man front, so they had the 4-man line, 4 linebackers, and then all of a sudden, Matthews runs free, stiff arms Tony Jefferson, and then that didn't work out. But 30 yards came on 2 carries, and on the other, what was
22.
22 yards on, 24 carries or 22 carries?
22 carries, yeah. So they averaged 1 yard per carry the rest of the game.
That was impressive. And there were numerous, there were a number of plays that were -1, -1, -1, -4. They were just blowing up the offensive line there. Didn't matter whether it was Tommy Kelly, whether it was Calais Campbell, Dan Williams. We saw Deion Buchanan making plays. We saw Deion Buchanan after he actually, he also whiffed on a play that could have had another play in the backfield. Larry Foote with a couple of tackles for losses. It was an all around dominating performance by the rush defense. On the other side, if you think about the pass defense, they did give up 238 yards. That's a low amount for a guy like Phillip Rivers, who is a volume passer. He had himself over 4,500 yards passing a season ago. He was held to only 80 yards in the first half, which was lower than any single half than in all of 2013. They got the big interception right at the end of the half by Gerard Powers. They had another interception that could have happened, and then another interception that arguably should have happened that was by Tony Jefferson, who was flagged for defensive holding. So it wasn't all bad. And if you look at the numbers, yes, Antonio Gates had 6 catches for 81 yards. The last time they played against San Diego in 2010, he had 7 catches for 144. So that's not fantastic. He was kept out of the end zone. Keenan Allen, big playmaker last season, 5 catches for 37 yards. Malcolm Floyd got picked on. I know one of those times was picked. It ended up being Gerard Powers on that. But 4 catches for 50 yards. Very, very reasonable output from all of those from that offense, and to hold them to 17 points, you'd call that a winning proposition if defensively you hold that San Diego Chargers offense to 17 points. Again, the big takeaways: they did not get a sack, and they seemed to get, I think, most noticeably that 5 to 9 minute period right at the beginning of the second half, where the San Diego offense seemed to be able to do whatever they want. It was also coincided to the time that John Abraham was not on the field. And Abraham was disruptive, but they weren't getting to Rivers completely, but he was disrupting things. And once he left, you saw the Arizona Cardinals defense isn't nearly the same with John Abraham off the field, despite the probably out of shape and old guy that he is.
Yeah, he still can rush the passer, though. I don't think anybody is going to argue that. And I think what's kind of disappointing is, and I'm trying to go through my notes here because I don't think my counting's right, but now I'm going to confirm it with Pro Football Focus. Did the Chargers really drop 7 passes yesterday?
I did not count the number of drops. I remember thinking, wow. The Chargers, I tweeted a couple times that the Cardinals were very fortunate with suffering from the dropsies. I know there There were a few. I don't know if they were easy drops, if they were close drops, but they were definitely not making all the catches that they should have. So the Cardinals were definitely fortunate on a couple of things offensively. There were a couple of passes that should have been interceptions that won't. They got dropped by the defensive players, and the offensive players were also dropping passes as well. But at the same time, that happens, and the Cardinals suffered from some drops as well. John Brown dropped a pass. That happens. I mean, Andre Ellington fumbled, and then Bobby Massey inexplicably decides he wanted to scoop it up and run for the touchdown. I don't know what he was thinking, especially when he has a cast on his hand. Bobby, bad Bobby. Bad Bobby, bad Bobby.
I like Bobby Massey. I like his gumption. Let's go for it all right there. But, I thought defensively the Cardinals, one of the things that Bulls did, and you can kind of see it, is if you're going to give up a catch, don't miss a tackle. And I think that's kind of the Tyrann Mathieu school of defensive back play. And I think that's, important because Patrick Peterson's going to give up catches. I mean, Antonio Cromartie is going to give up catches. The things that you don't want to see is what happened when, luckily, Phillip Rivers missed Malcolm Floyd when Cromartie got beat on that deep pass. That's what you don't want to see. And I think, you kind of hit the nail on the head. The fact that you're able to hold Phillip Rivers, to 238 yards, but more importantly, that you're able to keep him under 60% completions, that's really going to benefit you going forward when you have to play other quarterbacks that may not be as good as Rivers. Rivers, was outstanding last year, and I think outside of the schedule of Manning and Wilson and Kaepernick, I don't know if you're going to play too many quarterbacks that can throw against the blitz as well as Rivers did. So I think you have to be really happy to see what the Cardinals defense did and how well they played. Yeah, they had the bad first drive after the after halftime, but you have to be happy with everything they did. And I think you kind of hit it on the head with the pass rush thing. They are gonna miss Abraham if he's out for any extended period of time, because they just don't have anybody that can get after the passer like that. You look at what they had. They had, I know Thomas Kaiser is going to get a lot of run because his Pro Football Focus grade's off the charts for one game, and he had 2 quarterback hurries. But I think really the only guy that scares anybody right now is Calais Campbell, and
you can put 2 bodies on him, and
yep, and that's what the Chargers did. They double teamed him, and they said, okay, Sam Acho, okay, Thomas Kaiser beat our guy one-on-one, and nobody did it. I think, to go back to our original point, the one concerning thing is how much they had to blitz to create any pressure. So they blitzed on of Rivers' 37 dropbacks, they blitzed on 19 of them. So they're already over 50% on the season in blitzes, and I think that's where you're going to miss Dansby and Washington the most, is on those blitzes, because they got home a lot more than Larry Foote and Dayon Buchanan. It looks like not Kevin Minter, but Dayon Buchanan did. So I think that's where you kind of have to have some concern.
And you look at it, there were a couple of plays that you saw that you would say, he would miss Dansby. They missed Dansby, they missed Washington there. And those A-gap blitzes, Larry Foote is very headed. He made some plays, but he doesn't get through that hole nearly as quickly as either Dansby or Washington. And there was a couple of plays, one of the running plays, I believe it was, and it looked like Sam Acho could have had him for like a 7-yard loss. I don't remember what the scenario was, and it turned into like a 10 or 11 yard gain. And it was, no one was able to get that sideline to sideline speed that they had a season ago was where they made plays all over the place. It's going to be very interesting to see this defense play against a more mobile quarterback, as they were able to neutralize to some extent Russell Wilson and Colin Kaepernick because they were able to go sideline to sideline and keep going and keep them bottled in. They don't have that same speed. You might see them get beat for a few more of those runs. I mean, heck, you saw Phillip Rivers take off and go for 10 yards, but then again, we saw also Carson Palmer take off for 30 yards as well. So it was kind of interesting. But yeah, they're going to miss that. They're going to miss that. That doesn't mean they're not going to be effective, and we saw that they could be effective. I mean, that defense was very good. Take away 2 drives, they were absolutely outstanding. Outside of those 2 drives, and one of those drives you can't really put on the defense because they were put in a terrible spot with the turnover. Outside of, that running play just ended up being a disaster for the personnel that knew what was going on.
Yeah, and you just kind of you look at the defensive work that happened, and we brought up the drops from the Chargers, but like you said, John Brown had a drop. We saw the fumble from Ellington, and then the Massey miscue, and good teams take advantage of that, and that's what the Cardinals are now, and that's refreshing to see. You take advantage of other teams' missed opportunities, and you try to limit your missed opportunities, and that's kind of the difference between a team like, you go back to last year, even like the Atlanta Falcons or the Houston Texans. You look at a lot of their games and they were decided by 7 points or less, and you go back and watch, and it's like, wow, there's a play that they missed that they could have made the difference in the game. And the difference now is you expect the Cardinals to make those plays, and you expect them to be able to take advantage when the Chargers or whoever else they play down the line don't make those plays, and I think that's something that we didn't expect previously, and it's kind of refreshing, and I think no play or like sequence really spotlights that more than you talked about at the beginning, the end of the half, where Gerard Powers makes a great play on the ball, gets an interception, and there's 34 seconds left, and they're on the 34 or 36 yard line. They gotta get some yardage. They gotta go about 40 yards to get into field goal range. And I think I was comfortable with it. I was like, oh, this will be easy. I'm not worried about Carson Palmer. I'm not worried about throwing an interception here. I think it's smart to go for that, and they did it, and they put 3 points on the board. And honestly, you can look at that and say, wow, that's the difference in the game right there, is the fact that they had an opportunity at the end of the half, and they were able to take advantage of it, and they capitalized, and that's where they won.
And let's take a look at the good. The good. We talked a little bit already, but let's go back and forth with a good, something that you came away very encouraged by. I'll give the one first. Michael Floyd looks like, wow. And I was disappointed he didn't get more, but he was so dominant early on in that game. I wanted him to get the ball more. The ball got spread around. It looked like they were trying to get Ellington the ball more, but Michael Floyd looked like a man out there. So I very, very, especially last year when he had the big games and the little games. Well, I think it was, I can't remember what the number was, but he had as many games of 90 yards or more as he did with 30 yards or less. This is a great start. 5 catches for 119 yards. Didn't get in the end zone, but great. And he had 2 huge plays, a 40-plus yarder and a 63-yarder. So that's my first very encouraging thing. Give me one of your encouraging things for the team moving forward.
The first thing for me was, again, to go back to it, the run defense, and just how there's in this division. You have to be able to stop the run, and this team doesn't look like it's going to miss a beat. I think that's encouraging because you want this to be a consistent thing in this division when you're going to go up against some really impressive running teams.
Coming back to me, a next impressive thing that I saw was, well, overall the poise of Carson Palmer. There was no, he was almost too comfortable out there. He had time. He timed the throw. Now there was some pressure, but he wasn't. Maybe it's the comfort in the office, but he was able to extend plays, move around, move side to side. He looked like a quarterback that we hadn't seen before. Now, maybe this is the result of a team who was not a good pass rushing team a season ago. But they do have some talent there. That was another positive. Obviously, Carson Palmer was a positive. Despite some of the missed reads or the plays that were left out in the field, his line looked great. He moved really well. He made some really nice throws as well. That was another positive I took out of that game.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, as much as somebody can not trust Palmer, I'm probably one of the highest on that list. And he looked, as you said, kind of in control the entire game. He looked comfortable with what was going on, with the situations. Even as he was, running for his life at times, he was still making plays that you didn't expect last year. And now all of a sudden you saw it this year, and he was just calm, and it was good to see. It was fun to see, because there wasn't the lingering, and maybe this was just me, and maybe it was the beer, I don't know, but for me, there was no, okay, when's this Carson Palmer interception coming? Because I felt like he was missing. He got it out of his system early in the game, where he kind of forced some throws into bad windows, and then later on in the game, he was just so locked in that it was kind of like his season last year. The first half, you were like, here's Palmer, and then the second half, you were like, wow, here's this guy that can he get on a hot streak and lead this team, and he did exactly that.
Another positive I take from that game is if you see the contributions of these off-season pickups, well done, Steve Keim. Well done. You got Larry Foote in there, looking like he hasn't missed a beat, where he was very productive in 2012. He does have some holes in his game. He's looking Paris Lennon, better than Paris Lennon, whom, by the way, the coaches raved about Paris Lennon when he was here. Raved about him. So the fans didn't love him, but Larry Foote, he's going to be, as Arian says, their bell cow on defense this year. Very positive. Tommy Kelly came in, played some significant snaps, had some contributions there on that disruptive defensive line. Jared Veldier on the offensive line as well. These offseason pickups, Antonio Cromartie, he did get beat deep, but didn't get hurt by it. He played well. So you look at the pieces they've added, a lot of those pieces, and they make significant contributions. Ted Ginn, who we'll get to on the kind of the concern thing, but also made a huge play there at the end of the half on that catch down the field. That's my another positive. Are there any other positives you'd like to add?
Yeah, I wanted to, we'll get to the Massey Veldier thing, but I was really impressed with the entire interior of the offensive line. Even Paul Faneca, who, a lot of people know my take on Faneca. I feel like the coaches enjoy him more out of comfort than anything else. But Larson was excellent. Sendeline was, that steady presence that he always is. He's not great, but he's always in the right spot, and he's, always on the right guys, and that's important. And Faneca on the John Brown touchdown was, I don't know if you saw it, but he decided to light some people up on that screenplay, and it was, it was a good thing to see. Still some, missed things from Faneca and even Massey on the run game, but I think just the consistency and the fact that they weren't putting Carson Palmer under pressure was really important.
All right, let's talk about the concerns. Even though the Cardinals got the win, and I'm going to touch specific concerns. I'm going to throw this out at you. Ted Ginn looked like Javier Arenas out there. That there was so much talk about Ted Ginn and his impact on the return game, and I wish I had done it. I never got around to it. I had planned all off season was to go back and look at every return that Arenas had and every return that Ginn had to kind of compare the two, because the numbers weren't terribly different. There were a few more. It was a couple more yards per return that Ginn had. But aside, obviously, Patrick Peterson was a net negative a season ago in the punt return game. But in the kick return game, he looked like Javier Arenas back there, bringing the ball deep and getting tackled at the 10, at the 5, at the 15. That's something you can't have. Just kneel the ball. You might as well just take the knee, take it out to the 20. And he himself said, you've got to know when to take it out. If you're going to get it, take it out of the end, so you have to get to the 20. I didn't like his impact on the kick return game at all. And I tweeted that. That's what we're paying $3.25 million for? Really?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you're just wondering where our guy Walt Powell is. So
it's too early. Was that too early?
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think that was definitely an issue. I felt like that was an issue coming out because how much impact can a guy have on kick returns at this point with the way the NFL is set up and the way, everything's fielded in the end zone at this point. I think I jotted down the shortest he was in the end zone was 3
yards deep on it was a far right when they kicked it to the side.
Yeah, so it wasn't even like he's catching it, a yard deep in the end zone coming out. 3 yards deep, and like you said, it was at an angle, so he had to move. It just, I don't know. It was interesting in the off season, and it'll continue to be something to watch. I think more negative for me was some of the, and I understand it's early in the season, so Arians is still feeling his way out. But I felt like some of the play call / personnel matchups were disappointing. The two biggest were when he had the tight ends matched up in pass protection on an island and expected John Carlson and Rob Hausler to kind of hold up in that situation.
And two guys are known as, at best, passable at blocking.
Yeah. And so that was disappointing for me because I think, like I've said before, you drafted Troy Nicholas because of his ability to block. And he played 11 snaps, 9 of them were runs and the other 2 were passes. If you're going to have a tight end on an island blocking, I don't know. I feel like it should have been Nicholas, but that's just a small thing. And then the John Brown fade. I still don't understand what the point of that is at the goal line, especially when you have Larry Fitzgerald, Michael Floyd, heck, even John Carlson,
bigger targets.
That I don't understand the John Brown at 5, maybe 5'10", the fade. So I think that was my biggest negative early. Yeah, I think that's the first thing I would say.
And I'll turn to the play calling as well. I understood sort of why they went that route, but I didn't like the play call. I didn't like the decision to go for 2 after their first touchdown. I get why they did it, but it always ends up, you end up missing those points. You end up chasing those points later. And then when you decide to go for 2, you decide to have Jonathan Dwyer running a Wildcat offense, taking the direct snap, that wasn't ever going to go well. He's not Patrick Peterson. He's not Andre Ellington. Why in the world, if you're going to do that, is it Jonathan Dwyer back there? I have no idea. It didn't look good to begin with. It was terrible.
Yeah, and like I tweeted out during the game, if you're going to do that, why not just have Logan Thomas active just to come in for that? He's a better athlete than Dwyer, and, say what you want about him throwing the ball. At least he can, maybe throw the ball and get rid of the ball there. So I don't know. I agree with that. That was another silly thing. Obviously little thing, but just something that you hope doesn't continue to manifest itself.
Pass rush obviously has to be a concern. The fact they got 0 sacks out of that game, they were getting a little bit of disruption, but the fact they were never really ever get to Rivers, they never really hit him. That's a concern moving forward, especially in a division where you're going to be facing some pretty decent quarterbacks. Say what you want, and you have Matthew Stafford, Matt Ryan, Tony Romo, who he does Tony Romo things, but look at his numbers. He's really good. So they face some really good quarterbacks. They face Eli, they face Peyton, they face Matt Ryan. They've got Tony Romo. They have Matt Stafford. On top of that, Russell Wilson. And the list goes on and on. There's some really good quarterbacks they play this year. Hey, Alex Smith. No, I'm kidding. Alex Smith. No, but they've got a. You have a lineup of some really good quarterbacks, and Larry Foote said it wasn't pregame. It was I heard it on the radio on the way out when Paul Calvisi talked to Larry Foote in the locker room a couple of days before. He said it doesn't matter who it is back there playing quarterback. You have to make them uncomfortable. I don't think they made Phillip Rivers uncomfortable. They just made plays. They'd made enough plays in the middle of the field, and they were stopping the running game, and so they weren't making big plays down the field, and so that was sort of negated. So I don't know if they're going to be able to win that way without some sacks. Yeah,
I get the idea behind, the whole pass rushing, efficiency type thing where you kind of you take into account quarterback hurries and hits and all of that stuff, but at the end of the day, and I said this the other day, a quarterback can still make a throw if he's under pressure. A quarterback cannot throw the ball
if he's sacked. No.
And you look at Rivers and you look at his numbers in this game. When he had pressure, when he was under pressure, it only came from 12 attempts. That's it. 12 pressures in the game. And yeah, he didn't play great in those 12 attempts, but he still completed 4 passes. They still gained 62 yards. Guess what? If one of those 4 completions is a sack instead of just a pressure, maybe the game's not as close. So it's just one of those things. Like you said, pressure is great, but at some point you want to see these guys get home and make a game-altering type play, almost like Jeremiah Atachu did against the Cardinals.
Yeah, and you said there it is. He got the sack fumble, and that almost was the difference of the game. We look at the kind of the offense in terms of Larry Fitzgerald, Michael Floyd, and Andre Ellington. Andre Ellington got 18 touches. Michael Floyd got 7 targets, 5 catches, big plays. Fitz, the only time they were able to connect was on a beautiful throw and a beautiful catch, which was key. They had to have it. Cardinals don't win that game without it. But Carson Palmer, it seemed, I asked him after the game because I asked, how tempting is it to just try to feed it to Larry? And he said, it's real tempting, but you have to trust it. And he said he got burned by it last year. It's almost almost as if he is reluctant to throw his way, knowing that the defense is still keying on him a bit, that he's going to make a mistake as a result. Now, Larry's not going to make as big a deal about it as the media or his dad or his brothers. But it's something to watch moving forward. I think he'll still have a few big games, but at least if you look at this year and you look at over last year, outside of one game, outside of Week 17, Larry Fitzgerald was not a difference. You did not feel that he was a dominant player on the field. I felt that way in Week 17 because before that he had a couple of big touchdown plays, but those kind of busted plays. It didn't feel like it was what Larry Fitzgerald did. Larry Fitzgerald was not a dominating player a season ago, except for Week 17. I don't know how much his knee had to do with, and there was the observation I made is that, wait a minute, I happen to I sit next to his father in the press box. And so I get a little bit of some of the commentary, the comments he gets, and I could comment to him a little bit. But I was very interested to see that there were a few times where, and I'm beginning to wonder, is Fitz really the number one receiver anymore? Because when they had like the couple of times when they went with one receiver and they either went with 3 tight ends or 2 running backs, when they brought in the fullback Hughes and 2 tight ends, there were a few times when Larry Fitzgerald came off the field and it was Michael Floyd the stand. I know why they do that in terms of running game, but you never saw that before. You never saw that before. Fitz didn't come off the field, and it's starting to happen.
Yeah, and Fitz was on. I think more interesting than that is Fitz ran 4 less routes than Floyd did. So he played in only 3 less plays, but he ran 4 less routes. That was interesting. I think it was Tyler Nickel, our friend, I think, that I can't remember, that said, Larry Fitzgerald is doing really well as a $20 million run blocker or something to that effect. And that's true. I mean, I noted it in the game. There was 4 occasions that I could tell from what is obviously not the best angle to be able to see things on the broadcast angle, where it looked like he was open. And it wasn't even that Palmer didn't throw to him. It's that Palmer didn't even look his way. Like, it wasn't even like it registered that, hey, I've got Larry Fitzgerald in single coverage. I need to, go look his way. It was just like, yeah, I can force this ball in between 3 guys to Floyd here, or give John Carlson this medicine ball right here and let him almost get his head taken off. So that was interesting, I think, more so than anything else. It's just, as you alluded to, not necessarily that maybe Palmer wasn't looking his way or anything of that nature, but that, Fitz is running less routes than Floyd was. Maybe the knee's worse than anybody's letting us know.
It may be, and because no one's going to tell us that hamstring injury ended up, at least based on what we heard Patrick Peterson say in the top 100 video for Fitz's hamstring popped in practice the week of the San Francisco game. It popped. And he still played that weekend, so there was no doubt that it was probably worse. Maybe it was Patrick just talking, exaggerating things. I don't know, but he was definitely hampered. But if you kind of read between the lines here a little bit, based on what we hear about Carson Palmer, is he talking about? You hear about his chemistry with Michael Floyd. You hear about the relationship he has with John Brown. You hear about how he lauds the play of Andre Ellington. I don't know if there's anything there, but and the fact that Larry Fitzgerald is not a captain this year, not that there's a whole lot to that, but you've got a whole bunch of these other things. Larry seems to be a little bit lower in the pecking order overall when it comes to the offense now.
Yeah, and I think that's a combination of good and bad. Obviously, it's good because now there's actually other options. We're not expecting, or we're not waiting for Beanie Wells or Tim Hightower to break out, or Andre Roberts, or whoever else it came along in that time. There are actual threats. You have John Brown, you have John Carlson, of course you have Floyd. So that's a good thing. But I think the bad thing is if it is them trying to, quote unquote, force Larry out, or, prepare to move on from Larry next year, at some point, maybe is it, going at a detriment to the team type thing, where there were obvious plays that Fitz was open that Palmer didn't even look his way. And that, I think, is the only concerning thing. There's really nothing else in terms of, they're not calling plays for Fitz, blah, blah, blah. It just didn't look like Carson was even looking his way. Maybe that was just game one thing where he is trying to get everybody else involved, but I don't know. It's all speculation on our part, but it is an interesting topic.
On the lower list of interesting things, something I found interesting, you probably felt interesting, was who ended up on the inactive list. A little bit surprised to me. Well, it didn't surprise me overall. We knew that one of the defensive linemen was going to be inactive. Kareem Martin. Kareem Martin ended up on the inactive list, didn't play, and there were talks. I get it. I get why he was inactive of the guys who had to choose, especially when you bring in Thomas Kaiser. Kareem Martin really is only going to get this year. The only real playing time you're going to see him get is probably in those nickel and dime packages when he's actually playing on the edge at outside linebacker, where he'll probably be opposite John Abraham. And he's looked only okay-ish playing that position. Calais Campbell's not going to come out hardly at all. So he's not going to get that position. That's the only part. That's only the place on the line that he plays. He doesn't play the Darnell Docker position. He doesn't play inside the tackle. The only position he plays on the defensive line is Calais Campbell's, and they have him playing on the edge, where sometimes it looks like he's playing a 4-3 end, but that's kind of how the Cardinals play it. They're 3-4 LB outside linebackers, kind of like a defensive end, and that's where they're going to have him play. Instead, they have Tommy Kelly. This week, it looks like he'll probably be active because, Frosty Rucker is supposedly out, and then you've got the concern with John Abraham. So it looks like Kareem Martin will probably get some more play this week. You might see him come in with Thomas Kaiser for some nickel packages for the pass rush. I thought it was interesting Earl Watford was inactive. I thought for sure it would be Jonathan Cooper based on the talk, but obviously even not Jonathan Cooper that is not 100% is a little higher on the pecking order than a healthy Earl Watford, and I thought that was a little bit interesting. Cooper came in for one play when Faneca had to come out. Larson moved over to right guard, Cooper at left guard. It kind of whiffed on a play and then came back out, and Faneca came back in. But he got out in the field, was out there for a quick. I found that was interesting. I thought Cooper was going to be inactive. Glenn Carson being inactive, Darren Fells being inactive, and you'd say, they talked about how much Glenn Carson brings to but then he didn't play. Despite they only have like a million inside linebackers. Darren Fells, and who was on that list? I'm trying to remember who else was on that list that stood out. Logan Thomas. That wasn't a surprise at all. Did you see any surprises with anything that stood out to you on the inactives?
I thought the Martin thing was interesting to me. The Watford thing is interesting because, as you said, if obviously, as I talked about earlier, Larson and Faneca played well, but if Cooper's healthy enough to back those guys up, shouldn't you try to get him into the starting lineup? I don't know. That's a whole other discussion for another day. But that was my thing. Like, if he's healthy to back up, why isn't he playing? And then in that case, then why isn't Earl Watford active instead, just in case? And Cooper on that one play, he got blown up on that play. That was was really disconcerting. I mean, I don't think you're all that surprised. I guess only having 3 tight ends active was kind of surprising, especially with how little they like to use Troy Nicholas in the passing game. So basically, if Hausler or Carlson go down, you're stuck with Nicholas, or are you just going to go, 3 wide and 1 tight the rest of the game? I don't know. I guess you can argue that, but I think the Martin thing we've talked about, he doesn't really bring a whole lot to the table in terms of pushing Ed Stinson or Frosty Rucker at this time. So that's what ends up happening there. So I'm not shocked. I'm slightly disappointed maybe, but not shocked.
Something to monitor a little bit was a little bit of surprise is I noticed it when the defense came out for the first time and we texted about a little bit is the Kevin Minter, Dayon Buchanan thing that we got going on. Dayon Buchanan was basically an inside linebacker. I know he's been playing dollar linebacker. He's basically the 5th or 6th defensive back. And I get why he's not playing because Tony Jefferson he's been very effective overall. Buchanan still got some things to learn, but I found it really interesting how much he was on the field. There wasn't a single play. There was no single play, and both of us were able to see that he and Kevin Minter were not on the field at the same play. It was either Minter or as Buchanan. And I noted even early in a couple of plays, it changed later on. It was almost as if that Buchanan was the starting inside linebacker because it was almost a base package. The Cardinals traditionally, their base defense is with the 3-man defensive line, the 4 line is when they line up at a 3-4. And then in any of their nickel or dime situation, the guy that leaves is their nose tackle, Dan Williams, and they go with a 2-4. However, they started the game with a 3-3. It's a technically nickel, but with Buchanan playing alongside Larry Foote. So there were 3 or 4 plays when it was basically a base look, and it was Buchanan in the game instead of Kevin Minter. Kevin Minter did play in other base packages later on, but that's an interesting thing. You've got your 2nd-round pick from a season ago who is expected to be there. They've talked about how much they expect out of him, and he's a 2-down player at most. Larry Foote is the guy that's going to be out there pretty much every down. And while there's positives about that, it does raise a little bit of concern, something to look at as the weeks go on. Is that going to be the role of Buchanan? Is he ever going to play safety this year? Things to look at.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think it just comes down to the fact that Minter isn't really good in pass coverage, so you don't want him dropping into coverage. You look at his game totals. He played only 24 snaps. Buchanan got 38. Of those, Minter, was in on 18 of the running plays. He's really good against the run. Nobody's going to question that. It's just that he struggles so much in pass coverage that you can't have he and Larry Foote, who we talked about earlier, out there at the same time because neither of them can do that. So you bring in Buchanan, who, of his 38 snaps, 32 were either rushing the passer or dropping into coverage. So, he's the guy that they're going to use in that Darrell Washington role of the defense. That's what, that's how they're going to replace Washington. I think it's probably the most accurate way to do that right now. And obviously when I say replace Washington, I mean, in pass coverage or, in blitzing. And that's how they're going to try to make up for that loss right now.
Let's close with this thought. After one game, it's easy to get into overreactions or get too high, too low. But the Cardinals come away with a difficult win and a somewhat rewarding win. But after one game, does this team look like a contender in the NFC, or does it look like a pretender? I say contender. They looked elite at times defensively. They looked like they showed they can move what they can do moving the ball. They showed to be one of the tougher teams in football against a very tough team. I think that at least after 1 week, they are who we, aside from a little disappointing offensively, they are what we expect them to be. A competitive team in a very tough NFC.
They're contenders first. But second, and this is something I kind of tweeted out earlier, they are a good football team. And it's to the point where now you're expecting them to win games, and that starts this weekend against a New York Giants team that looked terrible. I mean, absolutely terrible in their season opener against Detroit. I think, a win is a win is a win, but if the Cardinals offense is not able to move the ball and put up points, and I shouldn't even say move the ball, if the Cardinals offense is not able to get into the end zone against that Giants defense, I think then you maybe start to get a little bit concerned about just the ability to score points, not move the ball, just the ability to score points and finish drives. But everything else, I think, this team has all the makings of being a really good football team that can get into the playoffs and make a run. And, we've seen it before. You get into the playoffs and all bets are off and anything can happen.
So there you have it. After 1 week of NFL football, the Arizona Cardinals look like contenders. They are 1-0. And they travel to New York this weekend to play the New York Giants, a team that got demolished. They looked terrible. And that's where we're going to close tonight. I will be on the show previewing, that's the plan at least, Ed Valentine of BigBlueView.com from SB Nation's New York Giants side. I'll be on the air with him, so I'll get that up later this week. Thanks for listening, Arizona Cardinals fans. This has been Revenge of the Birds Radio. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening.
Have a good night.
You've been listening to Revenge of the Birds. Keep the conversation going by visiting revengeofthebirds.com. Follow us on Twitter at Revenge of Birds. You can also find us on iTunes at facebook.com/revengeofthebirds.